Donald Trump thought posting a deadline on Truth Social would force Iran to the table. He thought a 10-day extension would look like strength. He thought wrong. Because Araghchi didn't go quiet, he went on Al Jazeera live and told the world there are no negotiations. Zero. And as of 11:47 last night, that statement is now Iran's official position. Here's what that means for you. Gas nationally just crossed $3.98 a gallon. That is up $1 in 30 days. Diesel is sitting at $5.37, which means every package you order, every grocery truck on the highway, every contractor buying materials is already paying the Iran war tax. And that was before the power grid threat. If Trump follows through on April 6th, analysts at Morgan Stanley are warning of a second price surge, one that could push regular unleaded past $5 before summer. To understand why April 6th is different from every other deadline Trump has issued, you need to go back to what actually happened in the 72 hours before he posted that extension. Let me take you back to March 26, because what happened behind closed doors in those 72 hours is the reason we are all watching a clock right now. At 4:22 in the afternoon, Eastern Time, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social. The post was short, clinical, almost. He said he was pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then he added 5 words that should have set off every alarm bell in every newsroom in the world. As per Iranian government request. As per Iranian government request. Goldman Sachs desk traders flagged the timing immediately. The post went up 38 minutes before markets closed. Not an accident, a deliberate move to prevent an after-hours sell-off. The market read it as de-escalation. Oil pulled back. Stocks steadied. The narrative Trump wanted, one that talks were progressing, that Iran was coming to the table, landed exactly the way he needed it to land. There was one problem. Iran hadn't made any request. Within 90 minutes of that post, 3 Iranian state media outlets pushed a flat denial. No request had been made. No extension had been asked for. The framing was false. And then Araghchi sat down in front of a camera. The interview aired at 9:11 p.m. Tehran time on Al Jazeera. It ran 14 minutes. And in those 14 minutes, Iran's foreign minister did something that almost never happens in active wartime diplomacy. He dismantled his opponent's narrative in public, in real time, with a calm that was more unsettling than any missile launch. He confirmed that messages had been exchanged with Steve Witkoff. Directly, he said, but he drew a line. A hard one. Receiving a message, he said, is not a negotiation. He used the word betrayal twice. He referenced the 2015 nuclear deal. He referenced the moment the United States walked away from it. He said Iran had learned that lesson with its flesh and bones, and then he said it. Iran's trust level with Washington is at 0. By 9:40 p.m. Tehran time, that clip had been shared 140,000 times across Telegram channels inside Iran. Not because it was surprising, because it was the first time a senior Iranian official had said out loud what the Iranian public already believed. The next morning, the Foreign Ministry held a press briefing. Spokesperson Esmail Baqai stood at the podium and confirmed that, yes, the United States had submitted a formal negotiation request. And then he said something that reframed the entire conversation. Iran has had no negotiations in 31 days of war. Not a breakdown in talks, not a pause, no negotiations. 31 days of war and 0 negotiations. The United States submission wasn't a sign of diplomatic progress. Baqai read it as a confession. 3 European diplomatic cables sent to Brussels that same morning, flagged by Reuters' Vienna correspondent, described the Iranian position as hardened beyond what mediators expected at this stage. That word, hardened. This was not a side preparing to fold. This was a side that had looked at 31 days of strikes, calculated what it had left, and decided the math still worked in their favor. And it was at this point, and somewhere between that Brussels cable and the third Iranian denial in 48 hours, that the meeting happened, the one that didn't make the briefings. Trump was shown the transcript of the Araghchi interview, the full transcript, not the clips, not the summary, the full 14 minutes. He read the zero trust line. He read the part about betrayal. He read Araghchi calling the negotiation request an admission of defeat. He went quiet, not the kind of quiet that means he's thinking through options, the kind of quiet his staff has learned to read as the moment before a post. The kind of quiet that empties a room. There was one senior National Security Council advisor still at the table. According to 2 sources with direct knowledge of that conversation, Trump looked up from the transcript and said 5 words. He said it on camera. That was it. The advisor didn't respond, because everyone who works closely with this president understands what that silence means. When Iran makes a definitive public statement, Trump escalates publicly. and negotiates privately. That gap between the public declaration and the back channel is where this war is actually being fought. And the back channel, it turns out, runs through Islamabad. Pakistan has been the quiet country in this war. Not quiet because it has no stake. Quiet because it has chosen a role that is more valuable than any public position, the role of the messenger. While Turkey was angling for a mediation spotlight and Qatar was managing its own exposure, Pakistan made a different calculation. It offered its foreign ministry as a physical relay, not a video call, not an encrypted channel. Physical written communications hand-delivered between Islamabad and the Iranian Foreign Ministry. Steve Witkoff has been sending messages through that relay. Iran has been responding through that relay. And last week, a senior Pakistani diplomatic official, speaking anonymously to Reuters, confirmed what most governments in the region had already suspected. Iran has responded to at least 3 of the 15 United States demands, not accepted, responded. The responses were described internally as non-committal acknowledgments. The Pakistani officials' exact characterization, and this is the part that did not make headlines, was that both sides are performing non-negotiation for their domestic audiences, while a real framework is being quietly drafted in the background. That framework has a name inside the back channel, the Islamabad Protocol. It runs to 34 pages. Iran has annotated 11 of them. Let that sit for a moment, because what that means is this, the country that is publicly saying there are 0 negotiations, trust level at 0, no talks in 31 days of war, that country has annotated 11 pages of a draft peace framework. That is not the behavior of a side that has given up on diplomacy. That is the behavior of a side that refuses to be seen doing diplomacy. And the reason Iran cannot be seen doing diplomacy right now comes down to one thing. What happened the last time they trusted a framework? The 2015 nuclear deal, years of negotiation, a signed agreement, international verification. And then, in May of 2018, the United States walked away. Not because Iran violated the terms, because a new administration decided the terms weren't good enough. Iran signed a deal and got sanctions anyway. That history is not background noise in this negotiation. It is the negotiation. Every message Araghchi receives from Witkoff, he reads through the lens of 2018. Every concession Iran considers, it measures against what happened the last time it made concessions. The trust level is at 0, not because of this war, because of that deal. And here is where the historical record becomes impossible to ignore. A public deadline issued by a sitting United States president during active hostilities, followed immediately by a categorical denial from the opposing government that any talks exist. This has happened exactly 3 times in modern diplomatic history. The first time was June 2019, North Korea. The Singapore framework was publicly disavowed by Pyongyang's state media within 48 hours of the deadline window. Kim Jong-un's foreign ministry called the United States position, quote, gangster-like, end quote. And yet, behind the scenes, through back channels running through Beijing, the core terms of the framework were being quietly accepted. The public denial was not a rejection. It was a negotiating posture designed to extract one more concession before signing. The second time was August 2021, the Taliban. Doha signatories publicly disavowed the withdrawal timeline they had already agreed to in writing. The denial was so complete, so categorical, that 3 European governments publicly warned the United States it was being played. It wasn't. The deal held. The withdrawal happened on the timeline that had been privately agreed. And now, for the 3rd time, the script is playing out again. A government at war with the United States, a public deadline, a categorical denial that talks exist, and a back channel running through a 3rd country where the actual terms are being quietly negotiated. The question is not whether Iran is negotiating. The question is whether Trump's April 6th deadline is real, or whether it is the same kind of performance that Iran's denial is. 2 sides, both performing non-negotiation, both watching to see who blinks first in public while they quietly keep talking in private. That question has an answer, and it is not the one most people are expecting. But here is what nobody is talking about, and because everyone is watching the wrong deadline. April 6th is not primarily about the Strait of Hormuz. It is about Iran's power grid, and hitting the power grid is a categorically different act than anything the United States has done in this war so far. Here is why that distinction matters. Every strike the United States and Israel have conducted in the last 32 days has targeted military infrastructure, command centers, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps facilities, naval assets, weapons depots. These are legitimate military targets under international law. They are defensible. They are the kind of strikes that allow an administration to say, we are hitting their military capability, not their civilian population. The moment Trump hits Iran's power generation network, that framing collapses. International legal experts have already said it publicly. 3 United Nations officials have said it on the record. Targeting power infrastructure that serves civilian populations, hospitals, water treatment, heating systems, may constitute a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. That language is now inside the European diplomatic cables. Germany has condemned it outright. The United Kingdom has gone silent, which in diplomatic terms is often louder than condemnation. If Trump follows through on April 6th, the United States does not just escalate with Iran. It hands Iran a legal and moral argument to every neutral country currently sitting on the fence. Countries that have stayed quiet, that have declined to condemn the strikes, that have kept their ambassadors in Washington, will face domestic pressure to respond. The war stops being a regional conflict. It starts becoming a global legal and political crisis, and Iran knows this, which is why Iran's 5-point counteroffer, delivered through intermediaries in the last week, contains something nobody expected. Iran is not asking for a ceasefire. Iran is not asking for a withdrawal. Iran is asking for formal, internationally recognized sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, not joint control, not a framework, sole sovereignty. Trump floated joint control as recently as this week, quote me and the Ayatollah, end quote, he said, as if it were a real estate negotiation. Iran's response was to raise the ask. That is not the move of a side that is losing. That is the move of a side that has decided the longer this war continues, the stronger their legal claim over that waterway becomes. Every day the strait stays partially closed, Iran normalizes its control of it. Every tanker that gets waved through on Iranian terms is a precedent. And then there is Ghalibaf. Trump said this week that he is negotiating with Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the former Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commander, the man who said publicly that Iran will never accept humiliation and threatened American troops on Iranian soil. That is not a negotiating partner. That is a domestic performance. The actual signal, the one the markets are reading, the one the Pakistani intermediaries are tracking, is Araghchi. As long as Iran's foreign minister is receiving messages and responding through the Islamabad back channel, the negotiation is alive. The moment Araghchi goes silent, that is when April 6th becomes real. So where does this end? I have given you the events. I have given you the back channel. I have given you the history. Now let me give you the 3 scenarios, because anyone who tells you they know exactly how April 6th plays out is selling you something. Scenario 1. Before Monday evening, Araghchi, or a Pakistani intermediary speaking with his authorization, leaks that Iran has conditionally accepted 2 of the 15 United States demands, not publicly, through a Reuters dispatch or a Wall Street Journal-sourced piece that quotes 2 officials with knowledge of the talks. Trump reads it, posts on Truth Social within the hour, claims the talks are going beautifully, issues a 3rd extension, markets read it as de-escalation, oil pulls back toward $95 a barrel. The April 6th deadline becomes the 3rd deadline Trump has extended, and the pattern holds. We do this again in 2 weeks. That is the most likely scenario. Probability, roughly 55%. Scenario 2, no signal comes. Monday evening arrives. Trump follows through. United States strikes hit Iranian power generation infrastructure. Iran's response doctrine shifts. What has been a partial strait blockade, ships linked to belligerent nations, becomes a full closure. Not a threat, an execution. Oil moves to $120 within 72 hours. Japan, South Korea, and Singapore activate strategic petroleum reserves simultaneously. The United States economy, already absorbing $4 gas, takes a second shock before summer. Morgan Stanley's commodity desk has been modeling this as a 35% probability. That is not a small number. Scenario 3, the one nobody has war-gamed publicly. Iran absorbs the power grid strikes, does not respond militarily. Instead, within 24 hours, Iran's United Nations ambassador calls for an emergency Security Council session. Russia and China table a ceasefire resolution. The United States vetoes it. But the image that goes around the world is not a military image. It is a legal one. The United States vetoing protection for a civilian population whose power grid it just destroyed. The war does not end, but the war changes. Iran stops being the aggressor in the global narrative. And that shift, that single narrative shift, may be worth more to Tehran than any military exchange. I have spent years watching how governments use public deadlines to manage domestic audiences while conducting the real war through back channels. What I am watching right now is the most transparent version of that I have ever seen. April 6th is 72 hours away. I will be here the moment that deadline hits, or the moment Iran blinks before it does, with everything you need to know before the markets open. Do you think Trump follows through, or does Iran send just enough of a signal to hand him an exit? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. And if you are not subscribed, do it now, because the next 72 hours are the most consequential this conflict has seen, and this story is not slowing down.